From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Dylan, the Tennessee pal Fagan. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. And guys, you know, it's been a thesis of our show for quite some time that history and the present and the future, these are riddled with unexplained events, questions that are left unanswered. And we're in a very exciting time in civilization, right? There are dangers that are unprecedented. There are questions that have never been addressed. And at the same time, there are astonishing breakthroughs in almost every field of science imaginable. And we got together off air, as we do, and we said, we've got a lot of questions about the world of science. Who's the guy who could answer these for us? Or who is the genius nice enough to humor us with questions about simulation theory, AI, regrowing limbs, interstellar objects, everything from the past and the way we reevaluate it to the questions and the big breakthroughs of the modern day. So with that, we do have good news. We found a guy to talk to us. We proudly introduce you to the author, the engineer, the cartoonist, the roboticist, the podcaster, fellow Georgia Tech alum, by the way, all-around science expert, Jorge Cham. Jorge, thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Hello. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me on your show and calling me a genius. That's probably overrated.
No.
That's something a genius would say.
It sure is. A self-deprecating genius.
Jorge's also an author. You can check out Out of Your Mind right now and in book form. I'm looking at a hardcover. It looks amazing. Mm-hmm. Written with Dwayne Godwin. Is that correct?
Yeah, Dwayne Godwin. He's a neuroscientist
Mm-hmm.
and Dean of Graduate Studies at Wake Forest University. So he's a pretty knowledgeable guy.
And we're big fans of your comic series, PhD, as well. We're going to get into some of that. You may recognize Jorge as the co-creator and host of Daniel and Jorge Explain the Universe, as well as your newest podcast project, ScienceStuff. Could you tell us a little bit about your background in your own words and what led you to ScienceStuff?
Yeah, so I have a PhD in engineering, in robotics, actually, from Stanford University. But then I decided to become a cartoonist, which is still something of a concern to my parents. So my career took a little bit of a creative turn there. I've done comics, I've done movies, I've done TV show, and my latest, and books as well, nonfiction books.
Mm-hmm.
And my latest is this podcast with iHeart called ScienceStuff.
Amazing.
Where we answer all kinds of fascinating questions about science for anyone.
And look, we're some of the original stuff guys over here with one of these weird little stuff shows. We are so excited that the format you've chosen for ScienceStuff includes interviews, includes all sorts of different explorations that I don't want to downplay, just conversational style shows, but you are really putting in the work to bring in other voices and explore things to their fullest. I really love it.
Yeah, thanks. You know, I basically have no rules on the show. You know, whatever it takes to best explain whatever question we're trying to answer. You know, if we find an expert and he's amazing and engaging, or she's amazing and engaging throughout, then that's what you'll hear. But if it's better for me to like go to a quantum computer lab and have you hear what a quantum computer sounds like, that's what we'll get.
Amazing.
And you also, I've got to say, you're also super into self-experimentation when appropriate. I'm thinking specifically about the hypnosis episode.
Yeah. I try to make it as experiential as possible. That's a word, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I should know that. And can I, take the listener along into whatever topic we're doing? So I did one where I got hypnotized. I went into the computer lab where they had quantum computers. I'm doing one coming up where we're testing whether frog meat really tastes like chicken.
Whoa.
Well, I'm sorry.
Cool.
I gotta quickly double back. Hypnotized. So, how did it
Yeah.
take? How did that go for you? And what are your thoughts on that from a scientific perspective?
Yeah, super fascinating. I think what we all think of hypnotism when we hear the word hypnotism is this kind of like mystical or hoaxy, kind of hokey, entrancing people. But nowadays, what people call hypnotism is more like therapy, like guided meditation, kind of guided therapy, really kind of getting you into your thoughts and getting you to use your imagination to really kind of basically simulate your life or simulate different situations so you can get better perspective on it.
To live in a simulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how they describe it. Yeah, that's how they describe it.
Can we go that route, guys? Can we go ahead and jump off of that cliff?
I think we
That's
must.
the
I think
segue. We
must.
have to.
Parachutes or no?
It feels like we're teetering on the brink already.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So for years, the better part of a decade, we have been fascinated with the concept of simulation theory. Jorge, could you explain, just in the brief baseline, what people mean when they say simulation theory?
Yeah, basically it's the idea that we're not really real. Like you are not real biological animals with brains. We're actually just characters in a video game. So that's the basic idea. We're all just kind of like non-player characters, NPCs, in some sort of computer program, maybe run by some alien or advanced human civilization in the future, where they have a giant computer the size of a planet, maybe. And in this computer, they're simulating artificial beings. And the idea is that maybe we're some of those artificial beings. We're not real. We're not real people. We're actually just computer programs.
Well, and this sounds a little out there when you put it that way, but there's some incredibly smart people that go all in for this, right?
For sure. Yeah, I think Elon Musk is pretty famous. Not our favorite guy as for some people these days, but he's pretty famous as being sort of all in on this theory.
Anybody else?
Yeah, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's on record saying this is a pretty compelling argument for the idea that we are in a simulation, and I can't think of an argument against it. So it's like, it's kind of a very intelligent, compelling argument that people who are for simulation theory put forth, and smart people can't really argue against it.
It's also fun just as a thought experiment. That's how I found it to be the most engaging, personally.
Well, you get into that in your episode. Are we living in a simulation featuring Nick Bostrom with Nick Bostrom, because he's the guy who put forth the philosophical argument, essentially, that this could be true, right? And if it were true, why? And I got to tell you, going through and listening to that, I wanted to ask you. I want to ask you both. Like, I want to sit down with you and Nick in that moment and just say, well, guys, what? I feel like we're thinking in human terms for a lot of these arguments, for like what we can imagine as being possible scientifically, technologically. We're talking about computing power and how, putting a bunch of computing power towards one thing or another thing. I do wonder if people like Nick Bostrom and you, like hyper intelligent human beings, ever imagined that the universe entire that we experience and believe to be the universe could be the thing that's being simulated rather than just a planet-sized simulation or something like that.
Yeah, you mean like is the universe itself a simulation? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's very suspicious, right? Because there's laws that basically help you predict what's going to happen in the universe. Like if you throw a baseball up in the air, you know exactly where to catch it. And so it's kind of weird that it almost feels like a program, right? Like it almost feels like a video game. And so, yeah, there's some people who think that maybe the universe itself, the whole universe, is some sort of simulation. But then you get to the question of what is it running on? Like, is it running
right
on a meta universe computer? Right? Yeah.
Well, yeah. Or is what we imagine to be reality just based on the constraints of this simulation? So what we think is possible, or even could be, is in a box that is, this place. I don't know. I'm sorry. Maybe that's too weird. Okay.
Yeah,
it's
no.
a good question, because it's also further to add to that box analogy. Part of the box is the limited ways in which the human mind can experience data. Right? We know that we were talking earlier on Ridiculous History about the concept of the observable universe, and Jorge, you took great care to point out that the observable universe is not the whole universe, not the universe entire, and therefore the things that we can observe through a relatively limited set of sensory inputs are not necessarily, the whole pizza pie. I want to go back to something you mentioned in your setup for this concept of simulation theory. You noted, yes, it's a coherent, it's a brilliant, it's a well thought out argument. It's also sometimes criticized as something that is impossible to disprove. Could you tell us a little bit about what people mean when they say that?
Yeah. So, maybe we should talk about the argument first, in case people
Okay.
don't know the argument. So, the argument is that and this was put by this person called Nick Bostrom. He's a philosopher, Oxford professor at the time, and he really took this idea that's been around, basically since computers have been around. People thought, well, if we can program little agents or little programs, maybe you can program people, and then those people think they're in the real world, but they're actually programs. But Nick Bostrom put out this sort of logical argument that said that there's really three possibilities that could be true, or only one of them can be true. So one of them is that most civilizations really don't make it very far. They don't make it to the stage in their technological development where they can build the planet-sized computer and build these massive simulations. Possibility two is that some civilizations can make it to that stage, but they don't have any interest in creating these simulations. Like, it's maybe they find it unethical, or maybe they think it's just a waste of resources. And option three is that, there are some civilizations that make it to this super advanced stage, and some of them love to make simulations, in which case there's probably billions of simulations in the history of the universe. And so the number of simulated beings would outnumber the number of regular, real, physical beings. And so if you had to make a bet whether you're real or simulated, the rational bet, if you were placing a bet on this, would be that you are a simulated being, because, the odds are that you are, if you believe these arguments.
It's amazing. So, Jorge, are you a father?
I am, yeah.
Okay, so did you have a Minecraft phase, or like with your kids at all?
Yeah, it's still lingering. It's surprisingly long lasting for kids.
A lot of staying power. Yeah, even kids, grow up with it and continue to enjoy it into adolescence. I mean, it's just such an incredible and creative platform.
So my kids are downstairs playing Minecraft right now as we're recording this, and they are in a procedurally generated world where if they go out far enough and their character via, as a user can see the next stage, right? The next chunk of data that needs to get loaded, it gets loaded up and they can interact with it, but it's not real until they get to it, right? That
right.
Concept of procedural generation feels uncomfortably real to me. In this world, but again, it doesn't mean it is. It just feels uncomfortably like that thing when we're looking deeper and deeper into quantum mechanics and deeper into some of the stuff that makes up this world. It does feel as though when we're actually looking at things and studying things, we're getting a ton of data, but then you back up just a little bit and not so much. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing because, in this back and forth argument between people saying like, oh, we're in a simulation most likely, or we're not likely in a simulation, that point gets really kind of thrown around a lot back and forth. And so some people say like, oh, it would be impossible to simulate the whole universe, every atom of every particle of everything, object around us. And then the people who are for the simulation say, oh, well, then you can use procedural algorithms where you only simulate the things you're looking at. And like if a scientist goes into gets on a microscope and looks really closely at a something small, then you simulate that little bit of with more detail. Quantum scientists are now saying, well, that's fine, but even if you did that, simulating quantum physics is so outrageously expensive for computers that you would have to have quantum computers. But even if you had quantum computers, then you have to simulate those, and then even those are super inefficient. And so it gets thrown back and forth, even with this argument of like using procedural algorithms.
It reminds me a little bit of your recent conversation on Science Stuff with the world experts on the idea of terraforming Mars. And one of the big things that comes up for people who are quite bullish on the concept, as well as for people who are very much against it, is the sheer amount of energy, right? And the ambitious technological breakthroughs that would have to occur. And I just want to say that one of my favorite moments in that episode was when you asked these experts if they actually wanted to go to Mars. And one of your experts straight up said, no.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because Mars right now is very inhospitable. You know, it's like a desert. You went there and your spacesuit had a leak in it, you would die. You know, there's no air, no oxygen. Your blood will boil, your saliva will boil. You wouldn't survive there. And so I think one of the experts said they wouldn't want to go there right now. First of all, because it's she has a family, and it'd be kind of a tough call there to make. But the other scientist said that Mars is another planet, and we kind of have no rights to it. You know, we should leave it as pristine and untouched, like we have national parks here on Earth.
Well, that's not going so well these days.
Yeah, I know. He might be in the minority there.
The prevailing attitude, it would seem in this country is one of colonization, one of like everything belongs to us, everything is fair game. And that certainly seems to be the perspective of someone like Elon Musk, who seems really hot on colonizing Mars and keeps, I would say, over-promising and under-delivering in terms of timeline around that. Any thoughts on that and like why that's such a hot, no pun intended, kind of topic for that kind of billionaire techie class?
Yeah. Well, I think the main problem is that there hasn't been a lot of research onto this topic. There were some papers back in the 90s, maybe in the 70s and 80s, and a few people have written papers since then, but a lot of it is kind of speculative or kind of opinion-based or very like back of the envelope kind of calculations. So it's kind of a field that right now is very open to different opinions. Like some people say, oh yeah, we can there's not enough CO2 in the polar ice caps of Mars to really kind of fill up the atmosphere there, and then some people say, well, that's all right, we can just round up some comets and the meteor and the asteroid belt and have them crash on Mars. And some people say, what are you talking about? That's insane, but it's possible. And so that's kind of how it goes back and forth.
Well, is that maybe also one of those kind of move fast, break things kind of approaches that a lot of Silicon Valley type folks, where it's sort of like trot this idea out there because it sounds on its surface so futuristic, like we should be on Mars, like we deserve that as a human race, as a human civilization, but then sort of sort out the details later.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. And it's also sort of something that it seems also possible in this problem to kind of trigger something that could run away from you in either a good direction or a bad direction. So, for example, if you melt, let's say, a little bit of the polar ice caps, that brings some water into the atmosphere, and then that creates a greenhouse effect, which heats up the atmosphere even more, which melts more water, more CO2, which blocks more sunlight. And so, you could maybe do something small and it will kind of cascade into this huge change in the atmosphere, possibly.
Right, a wave we can't turn back.
Yeah. And so it's at some points it feels like, we could totally trigger, global warming on Mars. What's the worst that could happen? And then some people say there's a lot that's worse that can happen there.
We'll pause for a word from our sponsors and return with more from Jorge. And we've returned.
A while back, I can't remember the name of the episode, guys, or exactly what it was on, but we talked about potential fixes, or like, let's say, terraforming light here on Earth to address some of the climate issues that we are now in the midst of. For a long time, it was this thing that was coming, that might come, that could be out there. And it does feel, at least in this moment, that with things like the flooding in central Texas that just occurred as we're recording this on July 7th, some of the warnings about iceberg. There's a doomsday iceberg or ice shelf that is essentially showing signs that we are very soon going to have a lot more water flooding the oceans. And it's making the oceans more salty, not less salty for some reason, which is just, it feels like we have a lot of problems hanging out here on Earth that deal specifically with climate and things that could be addressed with some form of advanced terraforming or light terraforming, just little things we could do. But when we looked at it, Ben, Noel, do you remember this? The concept was to, in some way, blot out part of the solar energy coming through.
Mm-hmm. Are you talking about the physicist that proposed setting off a nuke that would potentially fill the atmosphere with soot, and he claims would in some way reverse climate change?
That's one guy.
that's one guy. I wanted to bring that up. Maybe we'll get to that, but I just think it triggers me in that way. But Matt, maybe clarify what you're talking about. I'm sorry
You're talking about the proposition of blocking the sun.
Yes.
Right.
But again, just as a way to curb some of the heating, the overall, trend that we're seeing in heating temperatures, it just seems like they're, maybe to somebody standing on the outside, like I am in this moment, how can we funnel more resources, minds, and just energy into that kind of thing?
Yeah, because it seems kind of almost silly to be thinking about, terraforming Mars when we can't even terra anything here.
Right.
But what if it's too late here? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It makes me think about the thoughts that potentially there was life on Mars at some point in its past, or at least there was at least waters there, and the potential for life, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's wild. It's interesting because here in the solar system, we basically have 3 data points, right? We have Venus, Earth, and Mars. 3 rocky planets about the same orbit, same amount of sun. But all 3 turn out super duper different. It's almost like you have the triplets in a triplet experiment, and you see what happens to each one. And one of them is a super dry desert with no atmosphere, even though they all started about the same. Mars is a desert with no atmosphere.
Yeah.
Venus is the complete opposite. It has too much atmosphere, huge clouds of CO2 that make it 900 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface of Venus. And then in the middle, we have us. And so I think, we have a pretty good idea of what could happen if things go wrong either way.
Right. That's why they call it the Goldilocks zone, right? And there's something that I was talking about some of your work and your conversations with some old friends of mine from Georgia Tech, weirdly enough. And one of us stumbled on this point that I'd love your reaction to. It's the idea that, yes, terraforming already exists. Humans are currently terraforming Earth, just not in the best of ways. How would you react to that? Does that sound accurate or on base?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we are definitely changing Earth. I mean, Earth has changed a lot since the beginning. We started with no atmosphere, then it had an atmosphere, and then it didn't have any water. Then it had water. Initially it was all CO2. Then bacteria converted it all to some of it to oxygen, and that's what we have now. So it's always changing. But the idea that humans can affect that is definitely true. We've definitely through our activity are causing the atmosphere and the planet temperatures to change, and so that's actually one of the kind of ideas that they have for Mars. It's like, hey, maybe we can go to Mars and just polluted.
Great.
Basically.
Love it. Well, I brought up that, frankly, pretty ridiculous proposal by a computer scientist, not a physicist. I was mistaken. A guy named Andy Haverly, who's a Microsoft software engineer from Washington State. And he wrote a paper in an admittedly non-peer-reviewed scholarly journal, or I think it's a web-based collection of non-peer-reviewed scholarly articles that proposed sequestering 30 years worth of CO2 emissions in underwater rock by detonating a nuclear bomb underground within the Earth's crust. And he said he got the idea from the movie Oppenheimer, which seems like a really sound science there. But obviously, there's a lot of people saying this is absurd, and I'm sure that you'll probably fall on that side as well. But it does speak to something that is similar to terraforming, or maybe it is a discipline that is what sort of is the father of terraforming, this idea of geoengineering. And it's something that's, I guess, been around since the 40s. But the problem is, and the critiques that are often leveled at geoengineering are those knock-on consequences, those domino effect, butterfly effect things down the chain that can really happen without proper care being taken to prevent things like that. Do you have any thoughts about the concept of geoengineering, or if burying a nuke in the earth and blowing it up is a smart way to be good stewards of the planet that we've already kind of jacked up beyond repair?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think most people it's all sort of lumped into the same thing: terraforming, geoengineering. Crazy things like exploding a nuclear bomb, like you said, like to cause basically a nuclear winter to cool down the planet. Or some people talk about like releasing special aerosols or special like little tiny needles, kind of that will sort of reflect the certain wavelengths of light and things like that. I think as was clearly pointed out in the movie Jurassic Park.
Sure. Yeah.
Chaos is hard to predict. When you have a complex system like this, it's like they're basically ruled by chaos rules, which means things can take a turn for the worse really, really quickly, and without us being able to predict it, unless like every single variable possible, which we cannot have.
In a simulation, an answer to that, running these elaborate algorithms and these elaborate simulations that could potentially show more of those knock-on consequences. I'm just trying to maybe put a little positive spin on some of this kind of run amok AI or machine learning type stuff. And I don't mean to pivot too quickly, but do you have any thoughts around how these kind of models, could potentially be helpful with combating things like climate change, or is the genie already too far off and out of the bottle?
Yeah, no, I think modeling is the best tool we have, basically, because we only have one Earth. We can't experiment with it. We can't try something and see if it works or if it kills us all. And so basically simulations, computers, huge computers, that's the only way you can really test these things and figure out solutions.
I want to pivot us just a little bit here, and I think we all agree. I think we're all on the same page and agree with that answer. But in the course of your exploration, you've run into a lot of what we used to call mad science, right? So, or let's be diplomatic, out of the box propositions, right? There we go. Dream big. Humanity's always been a hold my beer species. So, with that in mind, could you tell us some of the most wildly ambitious, scientific propositions you've run across? The nuke stuff, the blocking the sun. What's the most sci-fi kind of proposition you've run into that has been seriously considered, whether in the past or the present, to address some of these big scientific issues?
Yeah, well, let's see. Just in the episode on Terraforming Mars, one of the ideas that's being floated out there kind of seriously to heat up Mars, because it's too cold there, is to basically create giant space mirrors, like float 100 or thousands of mirrors around Mars, and basically have them point the sunlight that Mars gets to the North or South Pole. Basically like a giant space magnifying glass.
Yeah. What could go wrong? I'm in.
Yeah, right. Doesn't sound too expensive. And then you could start melting the poles, and then that might trigger global warming, and then that might heat up the rest of the atmosphere. That's one crazy idea.
That's nuts.
Oh yeah, yeah. Have you all heard of a Dyson sphere?
Yes.
Dyson Swarm, baby.
That's another wild idea. You could just like cover a star maybe and soak up all the energy.
You'd have all the energy
of
you
a
need
star.
to simulate other places, probably. Just saying.
Yeah. And people use that as maybe a way that we could detect advanced alien civilizations out there. Like
Yeah.
if you see where there used to be a star, if you see that it's blocked off and it only gives, infrared radiation, then maybe they invented a Dyson sphere there, and that means there's aliens there.
How satisfying would it be to first find an extraterrestrial civilization, and then secondly, to see that one of our crazy ideas made it off the drawing board? It's pretty inspiring, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, it means we're onto something, right? Maybe hopefully they're nice aliens and good role models for us.
The concept of a Dyson sphere, Jorge, I was specifically reading about that for today, thinking about some of the simulation theory stuff. And it appears that at least the way it was originally imagined with the Kardashev scale, this concept of fully covering a star in some kind of, literally a sphere of technology to then absorb 100% of that star's energy, wouldn't be, at least to the understanding now, that wouldn't be physically possible because of the gravitational forces at hand. But this swarm concept to me feels, well, again, I'm using the word feel because I am not smart enough to fully understand it. But I would say if you had some kind of grid system, satellite system, imagine Starlink, but around a star, but then imagine the number of Starlink satellites multiplied by 1,000, then that kind of conceptually, at least in my mind, I can picture it. I do wonder if, as we've got these new pieces of technology, some of the new satellites, some of the new imaging tech that's even land-based, like Earth-based, where we can see out much deeper and much further into the universe, if we will ever discover something that we just don't understand. Our sensors don't understand the light. Kind of as you were saying, you could only detect infrared light or something coming off of a star. We just can't understand what that light is, but it's just, millions of satellites rolling around a star. I don't know what I'm saying other than that makes me very excited.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it seems very unlikely because the universe is so big and it's so sparse. Even though there's so many stars and planets out there, it's still pretty sparse. And so I think the chances that we'll ever meet an alien species or run into them are pretty slim. So it is super interesting to think about, like, well, how else could we detect them? How else could we know they're there? And to think about, like if they had similar technology to us, what would be the signatures of those technologies? Could we see radio waves coming out of it? Could we hear music coming out of their radios and things like that? Yeah. Or could we detect them using Starlink satellites to cover up their sun?
It's such a pickle, and we've talked about it a little bit in the past on our sister show, on episodes of this show, just the problem of time and space. And while we're here conceptually in outer space, while we're running our own simulation and model thereof, there's a question that I think has been on a lot of our minds ever since the story of Oumuamua. Why are interstellar objects so rare? Like, why is it so rare for us to encounter them? I think there have only been, check me on this, guys, 3 documented so far.
3 confirmed that we've observed, right?
Right. Yeah.
And the third one was very recently, basically last week.
So why is it, if the universe is so big, one of the first questions lay folks would have is, why is it so rare for stuff from the outside of the solar system to make it to this neighborhood?
Right. Well, the first thing is that's a good thing, Ben, because you don't want stuff crashing into your planet. You don't want to be living in like a debris zone, basically. We just did an episode about what it's like to be a planet in the center of the galaxy.
Oh, wow.
And the analogy there is pretty fascinating. So if you make a bubble around us, like around our sun, a bubble that's 4 light years big. Like if you look 4 light years in all directions, all that's in that bubble is basically us. Most of the mass in that huge bubble is just the sun and Jupiter, and the rest is just like little tiny rocks like our planet. If you take that same bubble and you put it in the center of the galaxy, you would find about 10 million stars in that same bubble, in addition to the supermassive black hole that's in the middle of our galaxy. So if you live there, you're basically toast. Like, like so many things can happen. Things can crash into you. Another star could be flying by and like kick you out of your orbit, or they could steal you and you'd suddenly be orbiting another sun. And with so many stars, there's like supernovas going on all the time. Quasars from the supermassive black hole would be like basically roasting your planet. So it's sort of a good thing that we're living in the suburbs of the galaxy.
Yeah, there's probably a reason life, proliferated out here, way out here in the quiet.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
but let's say it's thought that this one 3-eye Atlas, this most recent interstellar object, it's thought that it's potentially a comet. We need more information on it. Kind of the way there's a second one, guys, and I cannot remember it. It's not Oumuamua. It's not this one. It was the third one, which is I guess officially the second one, but it was. I think that one was proven to be a comet. That seems like an interstellar or an object that exists in space that is just moving. It seems like the kind of thing that could, with its own propulsion, just continue moving, even outside of one solar system into another. Do you think it's possible that an intelligent civilization would send something like that ever in an attempt to get out of their own solar system? Not even really to make contact or, nothing, not applying any kind of thoughts on it as to what its purpose is, but just sending something outside to see what's there.
Yeah. Well, I think, the way the physics works is that most likely these things do come from another solar system because, to get rocks or comets or anything with kind of complicated elements to form like in the middle of nowhere, like just out of a gas cloud is very unlikely. So most of these things probably come from another solar system. And then probably what happened was something knocked it and it kind of got knocked off its orbit and it got thrown out into space and we just happened to sort of catch it. Yeah, but whether they're sent by somebody...
Well, I'm not saying this one is. I guess just, I'm
no,
wondering...
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's a viable thing that we could even imagine or think to look for. Almost like, again, I can only imagine some of the satellites, the early satellites that we sent out. What was the one that had the golden record on it?
Voyager.
Yeah, just something like that, but more complicated and perhaps a little more rocky.
I mean, use the materials you have, right? Use the stuff that is proven to already be space worthy. So it's a brilliant thing to think about. Also, to that point we brought up earlier, I believe the second interstellar object confirmed in recent observation is Comet 2I or Comet 20. It's called Borisov.
Yes,
but yeah, confirmed to be a comet. This stuff is so cool because it shows us first that it's good, as you said, Jorge, to live in the burbs of the galaxy where it's not always a constant pew 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 of quasars. But then
it also crashes all around you.
Yeah. I mean, I live in the city, so that analogy really hits home. But I think there's another aspect of this to explore, kind of speaking to Matt's question about humanity sending stuff out, right? Just sending out Voyager or whatnot into the darkness. What do you see right now as the future of human space exploration in the broadest of senses?
Yeah, I think the immediate future is just to like check out our neighborhood. Like what's going on in Europa, one of the moons of Jupiter. Is there water down there? Could there be life in that water? Or what's going on in Mars, underneath the surface of Mars? Was there life there at some point? Could there still be like technically there could still be, little aliens living down there in the underground pools of Mars. So I think that's basically our priority right now, is just to learn from our solar system so that we can then know more about planets, how they form, what's going on with different planets, not just Earth. And then I think from there you can then start looking at exoplanets. So we've detected, thousands of other planets around other solar systems, but we know very little about them. Like, we don't know how they form, what's normal out there. There's so much we don't know yet.
Don't we kind of know that Planet 9 is out there, or there is some kind of object out there, a trans-Newtonian object?
You mean like on the other side of the sun, or?
Oh yeah, there was. There was more rumblings coming out of BBC Sky at Night magazine, something I was reading, a couple other things. On this show, way back in the day, we used to call it Nibiru because that was the fabled, secret planet that was going to destroy Earth one day. It was a really fun, hypothetical thing that was talked about on message boards and talked about for a long time. But it does appear that there is something out there beyond Pluto, essentially, or out close to the area where Pluto is located.
Yeah, no, I think that's something I think that's hotly debated right now. It's like, are there more planets even in our solar system that we just haven't seen? And some people, I know some folks at Caltech kind of study everybody's orbits, all the planets, and they, from just the gravitational signature, they're like, oh wait, these orbits tell us that there's something there, but we don't know for sure.
Something else acting on it? Is that what you mean? Like they can detect the force, the sum of the forces includes something that isn't immediately visible?
Yeah. Like they see for example, the orbit of Neptune, and they see it's not as perfectly accounted for with all the planets we know about. But maybe there's something else tugging it out there, and that's why they think maybe there's another planet out there. But I think it's still hotly debated, which means it's still a possibility.
Up for grabs. Love it. Love that great expanse. We're sort of in we're in that method of, as a writer, this, we're in that stage where we've got a couple of paragraphs and the rest of the book is kind of blank pages, right? So we're trying to figure out this saga together.
Hey, let's take a quick break right here, hear a word from our sponsor, and then come back with more Jorge. And we're back.
This is heading in the direction of science fiction, but we had a very brief conversation in the past about so-called artificial intelligence, or AI. So what do you think about the idea that the future of space exploration by humans doesn't involve actual humans? What if we create some kind of inorganic sentience or very highly sophisticated algorithm to be the next wave of astronauts? Is that a possibility, or how crazy, like on a scale of 1 to bat crap crazy? What is this?
No, it's not crazy at all. I mean, I'm sure whatever we're sending to space right now, you probably use this AI to some degree, and even the instruments we use at NASA, I imagine, use some AI. It's being used more and more, even in science and engineering. So it's not totally crazy at all. And in fact, some scenarios that people paint are like, well, maybe you can send one robot with instructions to land on an asteroid and make 2 robots and copy the program. And then those 2 robots have the instructions to go out there, look for an asteroid, mine it, get energy from it, and make 2 copies of it. And that's how you could maybe see the whole galaxy, for example. So it's not totally crazy. No.
Should we be sending people into space?
I think if people want to go to space, they should.
Okay.
Why not? I mean, if they know the risk, and there's a lot of people that want to have that experience, and they I think didn't they open up volunteers to go to Mars, and thousands of people signed up. So I think it's part of human nature to be explorers and to want to find out what it's like to be there. And,
well, hot take maybe, or I'm interested in yours. The whole space tourism thing and this sort of upstairs, downstairs of it all, where it's like, you know, a lot of folks that are going to space, like the Katy Perrys of the world, are coming back and acting like they've accomplished some great feat and feel as though they should be looked at in the same way as astronauts and scientists and folks that have trained their whole lives to do that. And what they've done is more or less taken a little joyride out into space and back. And it really does seem to kind of further drive this wedge between like folks with lots of money and regular folks, and further maybe even solidifies this idea of space not being for everybody, and that if anyone were to colonize Mars, I don't know that folks like you or I might get the invite. I'm just wondering about, you know, your thoughts on the whole social aspects of space travel, space colonization, and space tourism.
Yeah, I think these days anything that gets people excited about space or science or exploration, I think that's all great. That's good. Whether or not, getting to the edge of the atmosphere counts as space, and whether or not um, it should be something that only rich people can do. That is a thornier kind of minefield there. But ultimately, I think anything that gets people excited about space is good.
I guess I would say, though, that this whole thing that Blue Origin did maybe had the opposite effect of that. And I guess that's sort of maybe what I'm getting at, is this whole idea of like, what maybe once would have gotten people excited about space seems to have blown up in the faces of the folks that sort of staged this PR event, and maybe had the opposite effect and maybe made it seem a little bit more like this sort of bougie, tone-deaf thing, and maybe is making people look askance a little bit at folks, these private space travel companies. Just I don't know. Maybe that's my 2 cents, but that is the way it seems like people are reacting to that particular event.
Yeah, for sure. I can totally see that too. I guess one point of view against that sort of downplaying of those flights is that I think somebody told me that they've only done like 10 or 11 or 12 of these things with people in it. And so there is still kind of a significant risk for Katy. There was a significant risk for Katy Perry and all those folks to go up there. Like, I don't know if I would go if I was only the 12th person to go on this airplane or the spaceship. You know what I mean? Like, I'll wait till there's like 1,000 people have gone on it and
I can
nobody's
appreciate
died.
that. Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. Or not that dissimilar from the folks that got, imploded in that experimental deep sea, situation.
Yeah, that could have been them as well, and
but then that deep sea thing, a lot of people were like, almost like they were rich people that maybe deserved it or something. I'm not saying I think that at all, but that was sort of the internet perspective. One of the hot takes was like, it was poorly planned. It was really expensive. It was sort of this like prestige thing. But I'm with you, Jorge. I think you're right about the how few attempts have been made, and so anyone that's participating in it is taking their lives into their own hands. And the question there then becomes: is that worth, reverence in some way, or is it just kind of a little bit blind, like risk taking?
You got to wonder about that, right? Just the conversation. You say, "Oh, well, how many times have we tried this?" And as you're getting into the ship, someone says 11 of these went great, and then you say, how out of how many? And they're like, okay, well, time to close the door.
Jolly good.
I am jumping and turning a corner here, guys. Jorge Cham, given your experience with and expertise in robotics, what do you see as humanity's relationship with robotics, with synthetic pieces of a human, with things like Neuralink? Where do you see us going in the future?
I see us getting more and more enmeshed with robots. It seemed like a fantasy when I was a roboticist, just because the technology wasn't there. But I was just reflecting recently on just even things that you don't think about, like motors, like the technology on motors from the time that I was a roboticist to now has jumped, several generations, several huge leaps. You can make motors so much stronger and more efficient to the point where like a human-sized robot was sort of unthinkable in my time. But now, there's like 100 companies making
Well,
them.
question really quickly, Jorge. Robotics doesn't necessarily have to include some kind of intelligence. It can just be like automated, mechanized machinery that accomplishes tasks, right? Like like motors. That would be a form of robotics if it were programmed in a way that it did an automated task. Is that right? I just want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around the concept of robotics, and I'd love to hear more about how maybe that concept has evolved since you got started in it.
Yeah, no, you're asking a very deep philosophical, existential question that all robotics is kind of struggle with. Like, what is a robot? Like, can you call your car a robot? If it was a manual gear, or even if it's automatic, would you call it a robot, or does it need to have sentience or some sort of program on it?
In the UK, they call microwaves robot cooking.
Yeah, yeah. And now microwaves are super smart too. Now they probably do have AI agents like recognizing your food and helping you figure it out.
Do you fall one side or the other on that argument about what makes a robot? Would love to hear your thoughts on it. That is interesting, the philosophical kind of quandary of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if it's totally remote controlled, it's probably, I wouldn't call it a robot. I would just call it like a machine, maybe. You know? Yeah, but if it's doing things on its own somehow, either mechanically or through a computer program, then I'm pretty lenient on what you call a robot.
Yeah, I see. It also, I think it's also a good time to point out the fascinating etymology of the word robot in the beginning, which it itself was I think it was a Czech play from the 1920s. That
before that, it was automaton. It was the term that was used. Yeah, robot was. Yep. Sorry, Ben.
Robot, Robotnik, right? Is this term that already entered into our language with some social baggage, right? With some statements and some deep philosophical quandaries. So, as this technology, I love that you point out there are hundreds of companies who are working on things that we could think of as house assistant robots in some limited function. Would you and your family ever consider acquiring one? Or like, would you buy the 12th one, or would you wait for a few thousand?
If I can get one to wash the dishes for me, I would. Tomorrow I would buy it.
Brother. The worst.
Yeah. If it could do things like that, I would love to have a robot do. I guess I have a dishwasher, but they still have to unload it, or on my kids to unload the dishwasher.
You basically got to pre-wash them. I mean, come on, let's be honest.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And we see it too with it seems like at least the current speculation I've been reading about, both in private industry and in academia, seems to argue that a normalization or proliferation of robots in some way is inevitable. As the economy scale kicks in, prices decrease, they become more affordable. And they also seem to, I love your dishwasher example, the argument also seems to be that similar to the Roomba, the new home robot assistants will be specifically geared for certain tasks, starting like in a kitchen or starting with medical assistance. Picture the TV commercial, I've fallen and I can't get up. Would you agree with that? And kind of dovetailing on Matt's earlier question, how far do you think the prevalence of robotic assistants will go?
Oh boy, I think it probably depends on obviously your income level, and also where you live in the world. If it's much more economical for you to hire someone down the street to wash your dishes, then that seems like a better situation, because then two people benefit from that, right? And it's opposed to one person and a robot.
I do wonder, though, like where, a lot of the problems that we run up against when we're talking about mechanization and roboticization and involving, artificial intelligence or machine learning in tasks is, where is that cutoff? At what point are we going to pump the brakes and say, no, we want to replace these tasks that we have deemed to be menial and not worthy of human involvement without throwing out tons of jobs and things that people rely on for their economic well-being to protect and to feed and raise their families. Because it seems to me like there's really no way back, because the technology is out there and the nature of economics and the nature of capitalism is such that if it can be done, someone's going to do it and someone's going to sell it. I don't know. Do you have any philosophical thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the history of humanity is always taking the side of automation and efficiency and letting people figure out other jobs that they can do, if it's cheaper and to use robots. But most of our cars are made using robots too, and people are getting operated on sort of by robots now. And so it's all coming, and I think it's probably not going as fast as people maybe imagined 20 years ago.
And there's always a backlash. I mean, even historically, you've got like the Luddites and stuff, people smashing printing presses and, backlash against industrialization. So it's really no different than that. And I'm not coming down on one side or the other. I think to your point, it is absolutely just a product of humanity and just the nature of progress and all of that. But if you look back, even like people were very upset about the idea of the synthesizer. People, in orchestras thought it was going to replace them. But what ultimately happened was people figured out how to use synthesizers to make sounds that an orchestra couldn't make. And I think that's the neat part about all of this stuff, is figuring out those other things. But it doesn't entirely get rid of the fear that a lot of folks have about, being supplanted, by these types of technologies. So I don't know the answer. It's a tricky one. And I think you've pointed to that in everything that you said. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And all those ethical concerns are one of the reasons I'm now a cartoonist and a podcaster.
Well done. With that, Jorge, there's so much we want to get to that we may not be able to get to in our time today, but I can hear some folks in the crowd right now immediately asking a question that I don't think we've gotten to in previous conversations. With the rollout and normalization of robots, where does society land in its relationship to a surveillance state? That's the reason a lot of people have it's the old joke about engineers, dude. You know it from Georgia Tech too. A lot of engineers, if you go to their house, they're going to avoid smart devices.
Right. Yeah. Well, but you also don't want to be the person wearing the tinfoil,
Yeah.
That's what I was. Yeah, that's the issue, right? There's like a fine line between being the Luddite, being the person that's getting left behind, being the person shouting at clouds or whatever, or smashing printing presses, and being someone that's completely blind to the potential negative aspects of a lot of this stuff.
So my question then directly is, should people be concerned of increased surveillance with smart devices, Robotniks in their home? Or is that kind of much ado about nothing?
I think if you're someone with ill intent, if you're a criminal, if you're someone who wants to do bad things, then you probably should be worried. My personal point of view is, if you're not doing anything that bad and you still have some space where you have complete privacy in your home or things like that, or you're able to switch these things off, and generally, I think it can be helpful. There have been several cases here in Southern California of people like going missing, but then they were sort of found or tracked through people's Ring cameras or traffic cameras. And so those kinds of things can also be sort of usul, I think.
I think that's where I fall on it. I've always said, I don't really have anything to hide. I'm not that concerned. I think the benefits outweigh the negatives for me personally. But I know that that's not the way other people might feel about it. But I am with you on that one, Jorge. And I think that's a really good point. The triangulation, the pinging, finding folks that maybe never would have been found otherwise. There's always a double-edged sword to that kind of surveillance state aspect of things.
How is the Department of Homeland Security going to know you're not a threat if they can't know what alphabet ads should be served to you? So they got to listen in and,
see what you're
look
doing
at your
there,
credit
Matt.
card purchases. I'm just saying.
Shout out Palantir. Go Foundry.
It's all helpful.
Yeah, well, obviously, anything can be abused. I think, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I definitely don't want it to be abused. That's for sure.
Please don't continue abusing it, please.
Yeah. Shout out to our hapless NSA intern, Steve. Thanks for putting in the work, man.
You're the best.
Yeah.
Jorge, we all love science fiction, and we assume you also appreciate it. We love out there things that are hilarious, like Rick and Morty, huge fans of that kind of thing, but also something, like Prometheus in the Alien franchise. Is there anything that we maybe have missed in the science fiction universe that you could put us on to, or anything we should be watching, like a series, anything?
Oh,
or reading
interesting.
or whatever, listening to.
Well, I can point out to the usual things like Black Mirror or The Expanse, but maybe something your listeners haven't heard about is this book called Simulacrum 3. And this was published in the 60s. And it's basically what most people think of as the first novel with this idea that we might all be living in a simulation.
Neat.
So this was way, way back in the day when computers were the size of a building. They could process like ones and zeros on a card. But even then, there was this writer who was thinking about, like, wait a minute, what if we're all just programs? And it's a really trippy book because it's like about this ad executive who's programming this simulated city as a kind of a test bed for like testing out marketing ideas, slogans, and things like that. And then little by little, he realizes that maybe he's not real himself.
This is very Philip K. Dick-esque. I like it.
Right,
That's really
right.
cool.
This
That's
is like in the
very cool.
60s.
Yeah.
Very forward-looking, very twisty.
Well, and speaking of forward-looking, y'all might have heard this as well, but I believe finally William Gibson's Neuromancer is getting a proper adaptation into a series. And I know that's a big one in terms of futurists, and the idea of cyberspace, I think, was coined in that. And I know, Ben, you're a big fan, but I did just see news the other day that that got greenlit. So that'll be interesting because I have not read the book, but I need to. But thank you for Simulacrum 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
3.
I'm putting it on the list.
Same.
Oh, that's awesome. That was a great question, Matt. And we have another question for you, Jorge. As we're wrapping up today, we cannot thank you enough for being so generous with your time. Where can people learn more about you, learn more about science stuff, and learn more about your many other projects?
Yeah, so I'm on social media and all the platforms. Just search for PhD, like the degree, comics, and then you'll see me posting things about my the TV show I have on PBS Kids, to the book series I have for kids called Oliver's Great Big Universe, to this awesome podcast I have with iHeart now called ScienceStuff, one word. And every week we answer fascinating questions like, is it a good idea to get cryogenically frozen?
Hard yes. Let's do it.
No, think about the water, the way water expands. Okay.
Oh no, there's a twist there, Ben. It's not about the water expanding. A lot of people think that's what kills you, but it's not.
What?
Oh,
what is it?
Oh, we have to tune in.
Leave it. Listen to the episode. Listen to the episode.
There we go. Well, that is fantastic. This is Jorge Cham. Please check out the podcast Science Stuff. Please get to the website. We are not blowing smoke. We are tremendous fans. And now we have to call it a day because I think we have to figure out what's going on with cryogenic freezing. That's going to stick with me. I totally thought it was the water.
But if you want to find out, do tune in to that episode of Science Stuff.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm a big fan of y'all as well.
Oh, same. Appreciate it, brother.
Thanks, Jorge.
And that was Jorge Cham. As we've said, not to sound like a broken record, but we really dig this guy. And if you want to pick his brains for more historical aspects of brain science, of quantum mechanics, the history of the Big Bang, check out our 2-part interview series with Jorge on ridiculous history.
Indeed. In the meantime, if you want to check us out all over the internet, you can do so at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook with our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. On X, FKA Twitter, and on YouTube, where we have videos for your perusing enjoyment. On Instagram and TikTok, however, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show.
We also have a phone number. It is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname and let us know within the message if we can use your name and message on the air. If you've got words to send us, maybe links, maybe images, whatever, why not send us an email? We are
the entities that read each piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. Love a good book recommendation. If you've got something really out there, send it our way. We'll meet you a little past the light, out here in the dark. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.